you know, what I'm really saying is that I want this heartland to maintain itself as a source of strength and a source of values that are so important to this country. You know, my grandparents grew up in a small town in Kansas, and so the values that I think this community shares are the values, the ones that I grew up with. I don't want to see those fade away, and they don't have to. But we got to have a president who's serious about these issues. And I've been fighting for rural Illinois since I got into the United States Senate, and even before that when I was in state government. I've been fighting for rural America since I got to the United States Senate, and I want to make sure that I'm fighting for you when I get to the White House. So with that, let me stop and let me open it up for questions and comments. And by the way, they don't have to be questions. If you got good suggestions or advice, please let me know, because this is how we actually crafted this rural agenda. Was we had town hall meetings in rural communities all across Iowa and all across the Midwest, and so we weren't doing it in Washington with a bunch of think tanks and a bunch of lobbyists. We were listening to you. That's how we want to continue to make sure that we're hitting all the right points when it comes to our policy. All right? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Concerns with veterans.
Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. President.
You know,
but, you know, I'm worried about these guys. I know you're going to bring them home, you know, promises that, you know. But is the VA going to be ready for these guys, you know? Because they're going to have big problems, you know. I've been there, I know.
Right.
And they're going to have lots of problems. And, you know, now I hear like Bush doesn't want to sign the extension for unemployment for soldiers that's getting out, and they can't find jobs, and then they're signing back up because they can't find a job. And I'm just wondering if the VA is going to be ready for it, you know.
Let me first of all say I appreciate your service. And I don't think they're ready. You heard the story about Fort Bragg just recently. I mean, these are young men and women who just got back, and they've got buildings with mold and sewage that's backed up. And this is after we already saw the same thing on Walter Reed, so you would have thought they would have gone through every single facility to make sure that it's up to speed. Nobody's expecting luxury, but they do expect cleanliness and hygiene in the United States military. So that tells me they're not ready. You know what else tells me they're not ready is the fact that we haven't made sure that everybody's got the resources they need for post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, we've got hundreds of thousands of young people, and now that many of them are on second and third tours of duty, studies show that the more tours you're on, the more likely you are to succumb to post-traumatic stress disorder. And if they're not properly diagnosed and treated, they start self-medicating. They start drinking. They start using drugs. And that's why we've got a homeless population among veterans that's much higher than the average population, as well as a higher suicide rate and a higher divorce rate. Well, that's unacceptable. You know, they've served our country. We've got to serve them. So what I've said is, number one, we've got to have screening for mental health and as well as physical health for everybody who's discharged. They've got to receive services right away. Number two, we've got to make sure that we have records that are kept electronically that are transferred from the Pentagon to the Veterans Administration quickly so that there's no delay in getting people disability payments and getting them enrolled in the VA. Number three, the VA's got to have more money in order to provide the services that are required, and that's especially true in rural areas where oftentimes people have to drive 4 hours to get to the nearest VA hospital, which means we've got to open up more VA clinics that are more accessible to more people. That, I think, is an absolute priority. Number four, we've got to improve the GI benefit. You know, so many GIs are coming home, they're actually unemployed at higher rates than people who never served. And that means we're not giving them the kind of education they need and the kind of job placement services that they need. So when my grandfather served in World War II, he came back from Europe. He had served in Patton's army, he was able to pay for all his college education.